the environment. I don't happen to think this is a tough issue for conservatives or those who support liberty, but apparently it's a tough one. As everything else the left throws at us, because they talk about, polar bears. By the way, have you ever confronted a polar bear? It'd bite your head off in 2 seconds. But polar bears and penguins, and we're running out of ice, which of course we're not, and don't you support clean air and clean water? Here's the truth. I've been wanting to get to this for months, and I'm going to get to it now. We've got several hours. There's other things we're going to talk about. Don't sweat it. But sometimes we have to dig below the surface. Most of the so-called environmental movement today has transmuted into an aggressively nefarious and primitive movement. In the last 15 years, many of the tenets of utopian statism have coalesced around something called the degrowth movement. It's called the degrowth movement in Europe. And it originates in Europe, but now taking a firm hold in the United States. The degrowthers is what I call them. The degrowthers. And like other words I've used in the past, it'll be picked up, but that's okay. The degrowthers include in their ranks none other than Barack Obama. Degrowthers define their agenda as follows. I'm quoting. Sustainable degrowth is a downscaling of production and consumption that increases human well-being and enhances ecological conditions and equity on the planet. It calls for a future where societies live within their ecological means with open, localized economies and resources more equally distributed through new forms of democratic institutions. I'm reading from their manifesto. It is an essential economic strategy to pursue in overdeveloped countries like the United States. So we are an overdeveloped country. For the well-being of the planet, of underdeveloped populations, and yes, even of the sick, stressed, and overweight consumer populations of overdeveloped countries. I hope you're taking this in, because this is the real motivation of the so-called environmental movement, degrowth. So for its proponents and adherents, degrowth has quickly developed into a pseudo-religion and public policy obsession. In fact, the degrowthers insist their ideology reaches far beyond the environment, or even its odium for capitalism as an all-encompassing lifestyle and governing philosophy. Some of its leading advocates argue, quote, degrowth is not just an economic concept. We shall show that it is a frame constituted by a large array of concerns, goals, strategies, and actions. As a result, degrowth has now become a confluence point where streams of critical ideas and political action converge. Degrowth is an interpretative frame for a social movement, understood as the mechanism through which actors engage in a collective action. Did you know this? The degrowthers seek to eliminate carbon sources of energy and redistribute wealth according to terms they consider equitable. They reject the traditional economic reality that acknowledges growth as improving living conditions generally, but especially for the impoverished. They embrace the notions of, quote, less competition, large-scale redistribution, sharing and reduction of excessive incomes and wealth, unquote. Degrowthers want to engage in policies that will set, quote, a maximum income or maximum wealth to weaken envy as a motor of consumerism. I'm reading right from their manifesto. And open borders, quote, no border, to reduce means to keep inequality between rich and poor countries. I am telling you, this environmental movement is a communist movement, and I've been saying it for years. Now what I've done is I dove much deeper into this degrowth movement, which we have now imported in the United States. All of this, class warfare, immigration, race-based attacks, all of it, actually, circles around this degrowth movement, which is an attack on a developed nation, our nation. It might as well have a cover on it calling it the Communist Manifesto. And they demand reparations by supporting a concept of ecological debt, or the demand that the global north pays for past and present colonial exploitation in the global south. That's a quote. French economist and leading degrowther Serge Latouche oh man, that's a word I could play with, but I won't, asserts that, quote, we are currently witnessing the steady commercialization of everything in the world. Applied to every domain in its way, capitalism cannot help but destroy the planet much as it destroys society, since the very idea of the market depends on unlimited excess and domination. He also abhors economic growth and wealth creation, the very attributes necessary to improve human condition and societies. Quote, a society based on economic contraction cannot exist under capitalism. So they want economic contraction. They want massive redistribution of wealth. They want to set a wealth and asset limit. They want open borders so poor people and rich people and every other people are forced to integrate, quote unquote. No nation state. On July 18, 2014, scores of extreme groups throughout the world endorsed a proclamation titled Changing the System, Not the Climate, which calls for, among other things, an end to capitalistic, hegemonic system. In other words, America. You want to hear a little bit more about this? I think you should, because this is what's behind all these regulations in this country and Barack Obama's war